just moments before his flight to Zurich, where he and his mistress planned to welcome their child. Ethan coolly thrust a stack of divorce papers into his wife Eleanor's hands, demanding her signature in the middle of the bustling JFK terminal. Anyone watching would have assumed this was the rock-bottom moment of a betrayed wife's humiliating defeat. But Eleanor only allowed a faint smirk to touch her lips as she signed the Betrayal papers, then quietly pulled a worn-out suitcase from the luggage cart as if accepting her fate. No one knew that beneath that veneer of resignation was a plan calculated down to the second. And exactly 1 hour later, right at the TSA security checkpoint, the faces of Ethan and his mistress turned deathly pale. All eyes were on them as a piercing alarm blared through the terminal. What had turned the tables in a single instant? This is the story of the moment. Before the flight, when a husband forced his wife to sign divorce papers so he could take his mistress to give birth. I just smirked and signed, and an hour later, they were both as white as ghosts. I stood there in the middle of the International Departures Hall at JFK, a place where hurried streams of people flowed past each other like a time-lapse film. The chill from the air conditioning system seeped into my skin, but it was nothing compared to the icy frost spreading from my chest. In front of me, Ethan, the man I had called my husband for the past 5 years, was looking at me with an impatient glare. His hand was clenched tightly around the handle of a designer suitcase, one that held the future he had chosen, a future without me. Beside him, Isabella huddled close, one hand resting protectively on her prominent belly, visible beneath an expensive silk dress, a gesture that was both a display of vulnerability and a claim of ownership. Her eyes darted toward me, not bothering to hide the triumphant look of a victor. She said nothing, but her gaze conveyed the entire message. See? In the end, this man, and the heir he so desperately wanted, they both belonged to me. The sickly sweet scent of her perfume mingled with the cold air, creating a nauseating fragrance. In my hand was a single, flimsy piece of paper that felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. The divorce agreement. Ethan had already filled everything out, leaving only a single blank space for my signature under Spouse B. In the section 4, Division of Assets, he had drawn a long, decisive diagonal line, as definitive as the way he was striking my name from his life. The pen he had handed me was still in my palm, cold and hard. Ethan spoke, his voice laced with unconcealed annoyance. Sign it, Eleanor. Let's not waste everyone's time. The flight is boarding soon. The way he said my name felt so foreign. It was no longer honey or my love, like in the early days. It was just Eleanor, a simple name, a stranger standing in his way. He talked about time, about the flight that was about to depart, the flight that would carry him and his lover to a new horizon to welcome their child. What about my time? Who would give me back the 5 years of my youth? I looked up, staring deep into the eyes that once held my entire world, trying to find a flicker of the familiar, a hint of remorse, a shadow of guilt. But there was nothing, only emptiness and urgency. I finally spoke, my voice so hoarse, I barely recognized it. 5 years, and this piece of paper is all I get. In return, Ethan? My question was lost in the airport's cacophony, but I knew he heard it. I saw his jaw clench, a sign of suppressed anger. For a moment, my mind drifted back to the day Ethan first proposed. It wasn't at an airport, but on a windy bluff in the Hudson Valley overlooking the city. He had knelt and offered me a ring, woven from wildflowers, his voice trembling with emotion. Marry me, Ellie. I promise to build you a home, a place filled with only laughter and happiness. I had cried, nodding my head in a wave of overwhelming joy. A home? Yes, he had built a home, a very large, luxurious one, but it was a home made of traster glass, beautiful, but cold and fragile. Isabella let out a soft cough, pulling me back to the harsh present. She looked at Ethan with feigned concern. Honey, I'm feeling a little tired. Maybe we should head inside first. It was a subtle reminder, an effective psychological blow. Ethan immediately turned to her, his tone softening instantly. Just a little longer, sweetheart. As soon as this is done, we'll go. The stark contrast in his attitude toward the two of us was like a knife twisting in my heart. For her, there was all the care in the world, for me, only abandonment. I knew I had nothing left to lose. family, love, youth, even the dream of a child we might have had together. He had stripped them all away. But I couldn't let him leave so easily. I couldn't let him and that woman board that plane in triumph, starting their new life built on my suffering, funded by money whose origins I knew were far from clean. A plan had been set in motion. A chess game, where I had gambled everything I had left. I took a deep breath, mustering all my courage. The hand holding the pen was still trembling, but my eyes, when I looked at Ethan, were no longer filled with sorrow. I looked straight at him, at the shameless woman on his arm, and prepared to deliver the final lines in the drama I had orchestrated. Before this cold divorce paper, there was something we called a family. At least, that's what I had tried to believe in and nurture for 5 long years. I still remembered the day I first stepped into the life Ethan's family had built. The sprawling 3-story modern home in a wealthy Connecticut suburb looked imposing and grand. His mother, Helen, greeted me with a polite smile, but her eyes scanned me from head to toe with critical appraisal. She said, "Ethan loves you, so I love you too. Now that you're here, you're one of the family. You need to know how to contribute to this household." Contribute. I memorized those words like a mantra. I gave up my burgeoning career as an architect to become a full-time wife. I learned to cook the palaver elaborate dishes Helen favored. I learned to arrange flowers in the style she liked to show off to her friends. I learned to stay silent when she began her familiar refrain at every dinner. The Millers next door just had their first grandson. He's so chubby and adorable. Our house is just so quiet. Each of her words was like a tiny pinprick, not drawing blood, but stinging all the way to my soul. Ethan would usually brush it off. "Mom, stop it. We're eating." It was a weak, ineffective protest. He never truly stood up for me, never told his mother to stop putting pressure on me. His silence, his avoidance, was a form of complicity. It allowed his mother's bitterness to grow. She treated my inability to conceive as a personal insult, a defect that made me a disappointment to the Rawns' entire family. His younger sister, Vanessa, was another source of trouble. Vanessa was my age, but still lived entirely off her family. She treated my arrival as if she had gained a new unpaid maid and a personal ATM. "Ellie, I'm going to a friend's birthday party, can I borrow that dress?" Or, "Ellie, my friend's brother-in-law just bought her the latest handbag. You should tell Ethan to get me one too." Vanessa never asked if I agreed. She simply assumed it was my duty. In that house, the only person who offered a sliver of warmth was his father, Arthur. He was a retired professor, quiet and composed. He never joined in his wife's tirades, but his silence was also a form of helplessness. Sometimes, after a scolding from Helen, I would retreat to the kitchen and catch his sympathetic gaze. He would just sigh softly and look away. I understood he had his own struggles, but that silent empathy wasn't enough to heal the wounds Iris endured. Our house was magnificent, filled with every modern convenience. Guests always marveled at Ethan's success and my good fortune. But they didn't know it was just a house of glass, transparent and gleaming from the outside, but empty and cold within. I withered in that luxury, counting the days, clinging to my love for Ethan and the sweet memories of our beginning to convince myself that everything would be all right. I remember once, while cleaning, I found one of my old blueprints, a project for an eco-resort that I had poured my heart into before getting married. Looking at the fluid lines on the paper, I suddenly realized I had lost myself somewhere along the way. The old Eleanor, a confident and ambitious young woman, was now just a shadow of her former self, living to please her in-laws. Ethan walked in and saw me sitting there lost in thought. He just said one thing. "Why are you looking at that old stuff? It's all in the past. Just rest and take care of your health." He didn't understand, or deliberately chose not to, that it wasn't old stuff. It was my dream. Looking back now, perhaps the cracks had begun to form from small things like that. From Ethan's thoughtlessness, his family's selfishness, and my own quiet submission. I had locked myself in a gilded cage, telling myself it was a sacrifice for love. But I was wrong. It wasn't sacrifice. It was self-destruction. And by the time I realized it, the cage was already securely locked. The pen in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The coldness of the metal seeped into my skin, piercing my thoughts, and pulling me back to a windswept afternoon 7 years ago. Back then, my hands were calloused from drafting boards and architectural models, but they were warmed by Ethan's. He held my hand and led me up that bluff in the Hudson Valley we frequented, a place where you could see the vast sky and the city was just a distant, shimmering haze. He was quiet the whole way up, just smiling mysteriously. His smile that day was as clear as the sunlight, making the heart of a young architect who only knew concrete and steel flutter. At the top of the bluff, as the sunset painted streaks of orange and purple across the horizon, he suddenly dropped to one knee. I laughed, thinking he was just playing a prank, but then he looked at me, his gaze so sincere and deep that my laughter died, replaced by the frantic beat of my heart. He didn't have a sparkling diamond ring. He had a ring hastily woven from wildflowers still damp with dew. He slipped it onto my ring finger, his voice trembling with nervousness. "Eleanor Davis, will you marry me? I don't have much, just a heart that loves you and a promise. I promise to build you a home. A place where you'll only find peace and happiness when you return. A place filled with our laughter, and one day, the laughter of our children." Tears streamed down my face, tears of the purest happiness. I nodded without a moment's hesitation. His promise then was more precious than any diamond on earth. We sat there, leaning against each other until night fell, sketching out our dream house together. He said he wanted a large garden to grow roses, my favorite flower. I said I wanted a study with a huge window overlooking that garden, so I could find solace whenever I felt tired. The first few years of our marriage were truly a sweet love song. The Ethan of that time always made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. He remembered all my preferences, from the fact that I couldn't eat onions to my love for hot chamomile tea on rainy days. Once, when I was seriously ill, he stayed up for 2 straight nights, personally making me soup, squeezing orange juice, and patiently coaxing me to eat every spoonful as if I were a child. He was also my biggest supporter. Whenever I brought my blueprints home, he would examine them intently. He didn't understand the technical details, but he always listened to me explain my ideas with genuine fascination. He used to say, "My wife is the most talented person in the world. You just fly, Ellie. I'll hold up your sky." It was that encouragement that gave me strength, that made me I believe I had chosen the right man. His love back then was simple and sincere, like the small, unexpected gifts he would bring home. A small succulent for my desk, tickets to a movie I had casually mentioned, or just a hug from behind while I was washing the dishes. Those little things built a love I thought nothing could ever shake. And yet, that warm man who had promised to hold up my sky was now standing before me, cold and cruel. He wasn't just pushing me away, he was shattering my entire sky. The loving words of the past still echoed in my ears, but now they were just sharp fragments cutting into my heart, reminding me of a past that could never be reclaimed. The man of yesterday was dead. Or perhaps, he had never truly existed at all, just an illusion I had painted for myself. Ethan's change didn't happen overnight. It was like a small crack in a wall. At first, no one noticed, but every day it spread a little further, until by the 70th time you realized, the entire wall was ready to collapse. It all started about a year ago, when his fintech business began to thrive. He started having sudden business trips, networking dinners that stretched late into the night. At first, I believed him. I believed the reasons he gave, believed the exhaustion etched on his face when he came home. I told myself he was working hard for our family, and I needed to be a supportive wife, not to doubt, not to bother him. I even felt guilty for not being able to share his burden. But then, the unusual signs became more and more apparent, so clear that my trust began to waver. There were the phone calls he always took furtively on the balcony. If he saw me approach, he would quickly hang up or change the subject awkwardly. There was the strange perfume, a cloying, sweet woman's scent, lingering on his dress shirts. When I asked, he would just frown. It must have been a client. "What are you thinking?" He made me feel like a suspicious, nagging wife. And then I found it. One morning, as I was taking his suit jacket to the dry cleaner, a small, folded receipt fell out of the pocket. It was a payment Receipt from a famously expensive, high-end maternity clinic. It clearly listed services like a 4D ultrasound and prenatal screening, and the patient's name was completely unfamiliar. Isabella. In that moment, the ground beneath me seemed to crumble. My hands trembled, the tarry sta, flimsy piece of paper feeling like it was on fire, burning my very soul. I sat motionless on the bed for a full hour, my mind blank. I tried to find a reasonable explanation, maybe it belonged to a friend, or one of his employees. But why would he keep it in his jacket pocket? Why at such a luxurious clinic? 1,000 questions swirled in my head, but they all pointed to a single answer I didn't dare to face. That night, I waited for him to come home. I didn't cry, I didn't make a scene. I just sat on the sofa with the receipt on the glass coffee table, and I waited. Ethan didn't get home until after 11 p.m., reeking of alcohol. He was surprised to see me still awake, and then his eyes fell on the receipt. His expression flickered for a second. He was silent for a few beats, long enough for me to see the panic flash in his eyes. I spoke, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Whose is this, Ethan?" He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on the receipt as if it were a venomous snake. He picked it up, crumpled it in his hand, and tossed it into the trash. He turned to me, his voice regaining its composure, even sounding slightly annoyed. "It's just my assistant's. Her husband was out of town, so she asked me to take her to her appointment and pay for it." "You're overthinking things again." It was a clumsy lie, an unbelievable explanation. An assistant who would have my Daclol husband, the CEO, personally take her to an appointment at such an exclusive place? Contempt rose within me. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice sharp. "Do you think I'm an idiot?" Ethan didn't answer my question. Instead, he raised his voice, using anger to mask his deceit. "I already told you it's nothing. I've been under a lot of pressure at work lately, do you understand? I just want some peace when I get home, but you're always looking for a fight. Can't you trust your husband for once?" He talked about trust while he was the Devons one trampling all over it. That night, for the first time in 5 years of marriage, we slept with our backs to each other. The room was spacious, but I felt like I was suffocating. The first crack had appeared, and I knew nothing could ever mend it. After that failed confrontation, a tense silence enveloped our house. Ethan became more careful. He no longer took calls carelessly. His business trips were announced in advance with more plausible reasons. He was trying to cover his tracks, to patch the gaping hole in his wall of lies. As for me, I was no longer the Eleanor of yesterday. I didn't question, I didn't get jealous. I just watched. My silence wasn't acceptance. It was anticipation, like a predator, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. I began to pay attention to the smallest details. His schedule, the appointments noted on his tablet, the work emails he accidentally left open on his screen. A betrayed wife's intuition told me that the maternity clinic receipt was just the tip of the iceberg. The truth he was hiding had to be far more terrible. The opportunity came one night during a torrential downpour, when the city was drowned in the sound of thunder and rain lashing against the windows. Around 1 a.m., I woke up thirsty. Walking past Ethan's study, I saw a sliver of light from under the door. I was about to walk past, but a few words reached my ears and made me freeze. Ethan's voice was not his usual calm tone, it was filled with anxiety, panic, and even a hint of desperation. He was on the phone, and, thinking I was sound asleep, his guard was down. I pressed myself against the cold wall outside, holding my breath, and listened. Every word he spoke was like a dagger to my heart. "I don't care about the cost. Even if it's millions, I can cover it. This is the only chance, do you understand? The syndrome is extremely rare. They can't handle it here in the Five States. The doctor said they have to operate immediately after birth, otherwise." Ethan didn't finish the sentence, but the silence that followed was more terrifying than any words. He continued, his voice almost a sob. "Please, arrange the earliest possible flight. I have to get her and the baby over there. I'll handle all the paperwork, all the money." My body went numb. My ears were ringing, and I could no longer hear the storm raging outside. A birth defect, the only chance, surgery right after birth. So that was it. This trip wasn't some celebratory baby moon. It was a race against time to save a life. The truth was too cruel, too ironic. A strange pang of pity for the innocent child welled up inside me, a tiny soul, who had to bear such a tragedy before even being born. But that flicker of compassion was quickly extinguished by a tidal wave of rage and profound pain. He was willing to do anything, to spend millions, to cast everything aside to save his child with another woman. And what about me? What about our dream of having a child? How could he have been so cruel when he told me we just weren't lucky yet, that a baby would come when the time was right, all while he was pouring all his resources into another child? I quietly backed away, returning to the bedroom before Ethan finished his call. I sat on the edge of the bed in the darkness. The truth was now laid bare, naked and grotesque. Ethan hadn't just cheated on me. He had used my sacrifices and my sacrifices. Patience as the foundation for his grand plan. I was just a pawn, an obstacle to be cleared away, so he could righteously step into his role as a great father. The pain in my heart was no longer just jealousy, it had morphed into a deep, abiding contempt. He might be a good father to that child, but to me, he was a child and an unforgivable monster. In the days that followed, I lived like a ghost. The pain and the brutal truth had nearly drained all my energy. There were nights I sat alone in the dark, staring out the window, and foolish thoughts began to creep into my mind. I thought about ending it all, just to stop the torment. But then, the image of my aging mother back home, the image of the proud, ambitious Eleanor of the past, would pull me back. I couldn't die so meaninglessly. I had to live. I had to live to get justice for myself. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. Ethan was no fool, and the power behind those millions of dollars was certainly not trivial. I needed an ally, someone I could trust completely. And only one name came to mind, Leo. Leo was my best friend from college, a genius in IT and cybersecurity. More importantly, he knew the old me, before I was buried in this marriage. After much hesitation, I finally dialed his number. His familiar voice came through the line. Ellie? Wow, it's been a while. Is everything okay? His voice was as warm and sincere as ever. Hearing it, the wall of strength I had so carefully constructed suddenly crumbled. I couldn't hold back the tears, my voice breaking. Leo, I need to talk to you. Can we meet? Leo seemed to sense the distress in my voice. He didn't ask questions, just said decisively, of course. Where are you? Pick a place you feel safe. I'll be there in half an hour. His unconditional trust was a small comfort. We agreed to meet at a small, quiet book cafe tucked away in an alley, a place I knew I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. When Leo arrived and saw my haggard appearance, he couldn't hide his concern. He pulled up a chair across from me and asked gently, "What happened to you, Ellie? You look terrible." I took a deep breath and began to talk. I told him everything, from the first suspicions and the maternity clinic receipt to the fateful phone call I had overheard. I spoke through choked sobs, pouring out all the pain and resentment I had suppressed for so long. Leo listened in silence, never interrupting. His expression shifted from surprise to anger, and finally, to pity. When I finished, he sat quietly for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. He spoke, his voice low. "I can't believe that guy is such a bastard. Ellie, what are you going to do now? Just divorce him quietly and let him go? Take some money and start over?" I shook my head, wiping away my tears. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice firming up. "No, Leo. If it were just an affair, maybe I would have. But he didn't just take my love. He took my dreams, my youth, and the money we had saved for our future. He's using dirty money to build his happiness on my ruins. I can't let him and that woman just walk away scotangent-free." Leo looked at me, a flicker of surprise and respect in his eyes. He could see that the strong Eleanor of the past was back. He nodded decisively. "I get it. What do you need me to do?" I let out a sigh of relief. I knew I had come to the right person. "I want to know where that money, those millions of dollars, really came from." Leo smiled, a sharp, confident smile. He replied, "All right. Let's see what your brilliant husband has been doing behind your back. You're not alone in this chess game." Ever since I met with Leo, I lived in a state of anxious hope. Every day, I had to play the part of the perfect wife in front of Ethan and his family. I was still the gentle wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law, but behind that calm facade was a heart counting down the seconds, waiting for news from Leo. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would clench. I was scared, but also expectant, scared that the truth would be even crueler than I imagined, and expectant that I would finally have the weapon I needed to end it all. I had to admit, Ethan was a talented actor. He started being more attentive, occasionally bringing home flowers or asking if I wanted to go somewhere for a change of scenery. But I knew these were just gestures to placate me, to lull my life-fear suspicions so he could quietly prepare for his great escape. I accepted it all with a faint smile, a smile that probably held more contempt than I realized. And then, the fateful day arrived. It was one afternoon while I was watering the orchids on the balcony. I received a text from Leo. It wasn't long, just a few lines of text and an attached file, but it was enough to make my world collapse completely. I opened the file. It was a bank statement. My eyes were glued to the numbers and the text scrolling across the screen. Leo's message was brutally clear. Ellie, I just traced it. The entire amount in your joint savings account, over $250,000, was completely withdrawn 3 weeks ago. The money was funneled through several shell accounts and finally all ended up in an account under Isabella's name. $250,000. The number danced before my eyes, blurring and then sharpening. That was our sweat and tears, the years I had scrimped and saved, the times I had said no to a new dress, the vacations we had postponed. It was my last hope for the IVF treatment the doctor had scheduled. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the tiled floor. But I couldn't hear a thing. My ears were ringing, and my chest ached as if 1,000 needles were stabbing it at once. This was it. The final straw. He hadn't just cheated. He hadn't just had a child with someone else. He had ruthlessly stolen my dream of becoming a mother, the one sacred dream I had held onto for so long. He had used my own hope to pave the way for his and his mistress's happiness. I didn't cry. The tears seemed to have run dry. A terrifying coldness spread through my body, extinguishing all emotion. Pain, anger, jealousy, it all vanished, replaced by a hollow emptiness and a steely resolve. Ethan had given Isalda me no way out, so I no longer needed to show him any mercy. He had destroyed everything, so I would be the one to light the match and make it all explode. I bent down and picked up the phone. The screen had a long crack, just like my marriage. I walked into my room and stood before the mirror. The woman staring back had bloodshot eyes, but not a single tear. Her gaze was foreign, determined, and tinged with a cold cruelty. This was no longer the weak, submissive Eleanor. This was someone else, someone reborn from the ashes of betrayal. I picked up the phone and sent Leo a short message. Meet me now. We need a plan. We met at the same place, the book cafe tucked away in the alley, but this time, the atmosphere was completely different. There were no more tears or sobbing. Stories. I sat up straight, calmly sipping my tea. Leo arrived shortly after, looking at me with surprise and a hint of worry. He had probably prepared himself to comfort a devastated friend, but the person sitting before him was an entirely different Eleanor. Leo sat down, observing me for a moment before speaking. Are you okay? I put down my teacup, looked him straight in the eye, and replied, my voice perfectly steady. I've never been better, Leo. Thank you for telling me the truth. It hurt, but it was necessary. It woke me up. My calmness seemed to unsettle him. He understood that the silence before a storm is always more frightening than its roar. I didn't keep him waiting. I stated my purpose clearly and decisively. I'm not divorcing him quietly anymore. And I don't want a portion of the assets handed to me out of pity. I paused, letting my words sink in. I want him to pay for everything he's done. With the 17s. Very things he's most proud of. His career, his reputation, and his freedom. After hearing me, Leo was silent for a long moment. He laced his fingers together on the table, his expression more serious than ever. He said, his voice low and clear, Ellie, do you understand what we're about to do? Based on what I've found, Ethan's finances are incredibly complex. He's not just a successful entrepreneur. It's very likely he's a key player in a sophisticated money laundering ring. This isn't just a family matter anymore. It's dangerous. I nodded, showing him I had considered the risks. I know. I know what I'm up against. But when you have nothing left to lose, you have nothing left to fear. Right, Leo? The determination in my eyes convinced him completely. Leo let out a long breath and nodded in agreement. He would see this through with me to the end. He began to analyze the situation. To take down Ethan and the forces behind him, we need irrefutable proof. Not just disguised bank transfers, but the original ledgers, the data files with detailed records of their deals. That kind of thing would be kept in an extremely secure location. I searched my memory, mentally scanning every corner of our house, every one of our corner of our house. Ethan's habits. He was an incredibly careful and paranoid person. Critical documents would never be kept at the office. I suddenly remembered a detail. In Ethan's home office, there was a large safe disguised behind a painting on the Tana wall. He always said it was for important company papers, and I was never allowed near it. I told Leo about the safe. He nodded. It's very likely in there. But the problem is how to open it without being detected. A thought flashed in my mind. I remembered Ethan had a habit of saving all his important passwords in an TL encrypted note file on his personal laptop, a device he never let out of his sight. He was overconfident in his own security measures. That confidence would now be his Achilles heel. I shared my idea with Leo. He smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. Once we have a WWW specific target, things get easier. Your job now is to find a way to copy the Cristo data from that laptop. Can you do it? I clenched my fists, my eyes shining with resolve. I will. My revenge had officially begun. From the day I decided to fight back, I began to learn how to wear a mask. By day, I was the devoted wife, quietly managing our shared home. But when night fell, I became someone else. A thief, stalking my own house. My target was Ethan's laptop, the one thing he was never without, the device I believed held the key to the secret world he was hiding. I knew I didn't have much time. His flight was fast approaching. Leo had prepared a special tool for me. It was a USB drive that looked completely ordinary, but he explained it was a hardware data cloner. It could pull all the information from a hard drive without a login password, as long as the computer was in sleep mode. Leo gave me strict instructions. You only have about 5 minutes, Ellie. Plug it in. A red light will blink. When it turns green, it's done. Do not pull it out while the light is red, or you'll lose everything and might leave a trace. My chance came one weekend evening. After dinner, Ethan received what seemed to be an important work call. He went into the master bathroom to talk, for privacy. The sound of the shower running full blast was the perfect cover for my actions. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. My only chance. I took a deep breath and tiptoed into his study. Ethan's laptop was on the desk. The screen dark, but the power light still on, indicating it was in sleep mode. My hands trembled as I plugged the USB drive in. A tiny red light blinked to life, flashing steadily. 5 minutes. It was a short period of time that now felt like an eternity. I stood there, holding my breath, every sense on high alert. My ears strained to listen for the sound of the shower, my eyes glued to the blinking red light. With every passing second, my chest felt tighter. What if he came out suddenly? What if the device malfunctioned? 4 minutes passed. The sound of the water was still steady. I could feel cold sweat soaking the back of my shirt. The red light kept blinking, as if mocking my patience. I started to panic, wanting to pull it out and give up. But then, the image of Ethan and Isabella at the airport, the image of the divorce papers, the image of the empty savings account flashed in my mind, giving me strength. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to be calm. And then, the moment I was waiting for arrived. The red light stopped blinking and turned a soft, steady green. Success. I quickly pulled out the USB drive, shoving it deep into my pocket. Just then, the water in the bathroom stopped. Abruptly, my heart leaped into my throat. I rushed out of the study and back to our bedroom just seconds before Ethan emerged, a towel wrapped around his waist, his hair still wet. He looked at me and asked, "What's wrong?" You look pale. I managed a natural smile. I'm just a little tired. You go ahead and work. I'm going to bed. The next day, I met Leo. He plugged the USB into his computer, and after just a few minutes, his face became extremely grave. He said, "My God, Ellie, it's worse than we thought. The entire accounting ledgers, fake contracts, a list of misty accounts used for laundering, it's all here. Your husband is a reckless man." Leo broke the encryption and retrieved all the passwords, including the one for the DAF safe. The plan was halfway complete. Now it was time to prepare the decisive weapon. Leo handed me a black power bank, a sleek, high-end model, the exact type Ethan favored. He explained, "I've transferred all the data onto a microdrive inside this. I also embedded a small circuit with a special, harmless chemical compound, but one that will definitely be flagged by the new generation of airport security scanners. This will be your final gift to him." I took the power bank, feeling its weight in my hand. This wasn't a gift, it was a time bomb for Ethan's life. 2 days later, Ethan came home earlier than usual. The tense, secretive air around him was gone, replaced by a chilling calmness. He sat down on the sofa opposite me, where I was pretending to read a magazine. He cleared his throat to get my attention and then spoke. His tone was gentle, but every word cut like a Chaucer knife. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you." I slowly closed the magazine and looked up at him, preparing for the final act. He continued, "The company has a major project in the US. I'll have to be there for a while, maybe a few years, to get the new branch established." It was a well-rehearsed lie. He watched me, waiting for a reaction. I remained silent, letting him continue his performance. Seeing no particular reaction, he took 2 sets of documents from his briefcase and placed them on the table. One was the divorce agreement I had already seen in my nightmares. The other was a pair of business-class plane tickets, one for him and one for Isabella. Ethan pushed the divorce papers toward me, along with an expensive fountain pen. He said, his voice losing its initial gentleness and becoming commanding, I think it's time we set each other free. You and I are no longer on the same path. I need you to sign this now." Every word he spoke was a complete erasure. A sensing of our 5-year marriage, as if it had all been a mistake. I began my own performance. I let my eyes well up with tears, my voice trembling with hurt. "Set me free? Is that what you call this, Ethan? After everything I sacrificed for this family, you just say, 'Set me free,' and it's over?" Ethan seemed to have anticipated this reaction. He sighed, leaning back on the raccoon sofa with a look of exhaustion. "Eleanor, don't make this more complicated. I know I've wronged you, but you can't force feelings. Isabella needs me, and the baby needs me. I have a responsibility." Responsibility? He spoke of responsibility to his mistress and their child after 7, trampling on his responsibility to his wife. I laughed bitterly, and the tears began to fall. Tears were a woman's best weapon in this situation, and I was using them to full effect. I sobbed. "What about me? Are you just going to throw me away, like an old piece of furniture?" To make his act more convincing, he played his final card. He took out a bank book and pushed it toward me. "There's $25,000 in here. Consider it a small compensation from me. With this money, you can start a new life. $25,000 for 5 years of my youth, for a shattered dream, for a broken heart." He thought everything could be quantified in money. This insult was more painful than the betrayal itself. I pushed the bank book away, shaking my head through my tears. "I don't want your money. I just want an honest explanation." In Ethan's eyes, my action was just the foolish stubbornness of a defeated woman. He lost all patience, his voice turning harsh. "Don't be a fool, Eleanor. What other choice do you think you have? Sign it." I knew the moment had come. I looked at him, my eyes filled with sorrow, and said through my sobs, "Fine, I'll sign. But not here. I'll come to the airport tomorrow, to see you off. I want to see you one last time, and I'll sign it in front of you as our final goodbye." My request played right into Ethan's ego. He wanted to see me completely broken, to savor his final victory in its entirety. He smirked, the smile of a conqueror. "Fine. If that's what you want. 8 a.m. tomorrow at the airport." He stood up, adjusted his tie, and left, completely satisfied with the outcome. He had no idea he had just walked straight into the trap I had set. As the door closed, I slowly wiped my tears away. The pain was gone, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. I arrived at the airport at 7:30 a.m., half an hour early. I deliberately chose a pale gray dress, a lifeless color, and wore no makeup, letting the dark circles under my eyes show naturally. I wanted to look like a woman who was utterly broken, a pitiful victim in a play I myself was directing. From a distance, I saw Ethan and Isabella. They stood out in the crowd. Ethan in a designer suit, Isabella in an elegant maternity dress. They looked like a successful, happy couple embarking on an exciting journey. I took a deep breath, put on my most tragic expression, and walked slowly toward them. Ethan saw me, impatience clear on his face. He didn't waste a second. "You're here. Here are the papers and a pen. Sign it quickly so we can be done. Don't make other people late." The way he said other people was another twist to the knife, as if I were an outsider to my own tragedy. I didn't look at the papers. I looked up at Ethan, my voice shaking as if I was about to cry. "Ethan, I'm begging you. Can't you reconsider? I'm asking you one last time, for the years we had, for..." Before I could finish, my feigned weakness seemed to snap his patience, already frayed by the pressure of time. Ethan roared, all cruelty exposed. "Enough. Stop with the drama." He lunged forward, his hand clamping around my wrist with bruising force. He yanked my arm so violently that I lost my balance, my knees hitting the cold, hard floor. He stood over me, his grip tightening as he hissed a threat. Everything around me seemed to stop. A few curious onlookers paused, and gasps began to ripple through the crowd. Pain shot up my arm, my wrist throbbing in his vice-like grip. The plan had just passed a crucial milestone. Amidst the curious and pitying stares focused on me, I slowly looked up. Across the way, I saw her. A young woman holding up her phone, the lens pointed directly at us. A small red dot on her screen told me everything was being recorded. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, a moment of silent, female solidarity. She gave me a slight nod, as if to say, "I got you." Ethan, noticing the stares and realizing the scene he was making, quickly hauled me to my feet, his voice a threatening whisper. "Get up. Are you trying to make a scene here?" Isabella, beside him, also looked panicked, muttering, "Honey, people are watching." Ethan ignored her, shoving the pen and papers into my hand again. "Sign." This time, I wasn't acting anymore. Real tears began to fall, tears of passion, humiliation, and of relief that the burden was about to be lifted. I nodded through my sobs. Then my eyes fell on their luggage cart nearby. I pointed to a worn, scuffed suitcase, a stark contrast to the other gleaming, designer pieces. My voice was broken. I'll sign. Just let me ask for one last thing. Let me keep that old suitcase. It's the only memory we have left. The one from our honeymoon." My request, in this context, sounded pathetic and desperate. It seemed like the final plea of a discarded wife, clinging to a worthless memento. Ethan glanced at me, then at the old suitcase, his eyes filled with contempt and impatience. He just wanted to end this messy drama as quickly as possible. "Fine, whatever. What's a beat-up suitcase worth anyway? Just sign the damn thing." My hands trembling, I placed the papers on a nearby chair and signed my name. A single tear fell, smudging the final stroke of ink. I pushed the papers toward Ethan without another word. Then I turned my back on them and walked slowly toward the luggage cart, the cart that held both heaven and hell for Ethan. As I turned away, Ethan and Isabella didn't spare me another glance. Snatched the divorce papers like a trophy, and quickly headed toward the check-in counter, triumph and satisfaction in every step. They believed they had disposed of me, the final thorn in their side, and were free to start their new life. They had no idea that their own arrogance and carelessness would be their downfall. I approached the luggage cart, my heart pounding, but my hands surprisingly steady. Our old, worn suitcase and a brand new designer, one of Ethan's, were placed side by side. Seizing the moment while no one was watching, while Ethan and Isabella were busy with their passports and tickets, I executed the crucial move, a swift action I had rehearsed in my mind. I unclipped the luggage tag. bearing Ethan's name from the designer suitcase and attached it to the handle of the old one. A fateful swap, completed in a flash. Then, I pulled the designer suitcase, the one containing the fateful power bank, off the cart, clutching it to my chest as if it were my most precious possession. I retreated to a quiet corner and watched silently. A skycap pushed the cart to the check-in counter. He glanced only at the attached luggage tags and placed them one by one onto the conveyor belt. The old, worn suitcase, now bearing Ethan's name, glided away, carrying all of his criminal secrets with it. Ethan and Isabella finished checking their bags without a shred of suspicion and leisurely walked toward the security checkpoint. I followed at a safe distance, a spectator watching the final act of a play I had written. I saw Isabella go through the security gate first, without any issues. Then it was Ethan's turn. He placed his briefcase, suit jacket, and personal items into a gray plastic bin. The bin slid slowly into the X-ray machine. Everything seemed normal. I held my breath. Just a few more seconds. And then it happened. A sudden alarm blared. Not the usual gentle beep, but a long, piercing, urgent wail. The TSA agent's monitor immediately flashed bright red, with warning messages blinking rapidly. All activity in the area came to a halt. 2 stone-faced TSA officers in tactical gear appeared instantly. One decisively motioned for Ethan to step aside. "Mr. Ethan Hayes, please remain where you are. Place your hands where I can see them." The other, wearing specialized gloves, carefully removed Ethan's bin from the conveyor belt, isolating it in a separate area. Ethan was stunned. His expression shifted from surprise to anger. He shouted, "What's going on? There must be some kind of mistake." But the agents paid no attention to him. The team lead spoke into his radio, his voice sharp and clear. "Unidentified chemical compound detected in carry-on luggage. Requesting hazmat support." Ethan was frozen solid. Isabella, on the other side of the gate, turned pale. She stammered, "Honey, what's happening?" Ethan couldn't answer. He could only stand there, motionless, as the agents surrounded his briefcase. The team lead carefully opened the case, and the first thing he pulled out was the black power bank. He held it up, examining it with a suspicious eye, as if it weren't a piece of tech, but a bomb about to detonate. The door to a private screening room slammed shut, cutting Ethan off from the outside world, and from the last moments of his freedom. Inside, the air was cold and thick with tension. Ethan, after the initial shock, had quickly regained his usual arrogance. He crossed his arms, looking at the security team with a defiant glare, his voice still haughty. "It's just a power bank. What's all the fuss about? Do you have any idea who I am? You're going to regret this." The lead TSA officer, a stern-faced middle-aged man, was unfazed by Ethan's threats. He signaled to a technician, who placed the power bank into a Sentinel specialized scanner. A few seconds later, complex data appeared on a computer screen. The technician reported, his voice crisp. "Sir, the object contains no explosives, but there is an unauthorized, military-grade encrypted storage device integrated within. It cannot be accessed through conventional means." Hearing the words military-grade encryption, Ethan's expression wavered slightly, but he tried to maintain his composure. The lead officer stepped closer, placing his hands on the table, and looking Ethan directly in the eye. "Mr. Hayes, under federal aviation law, we have the authority to inspect any object that may pose a threat to flight safety. I need you to provide the Rebel-X password to unlock this device immediately." Ethan scoffed. "That's personal property containing business secrets. You have no right." The officer didn't argue. He replied coldly, "If you refuse to cooperate, we will be forced to use technical means to bypass the security. At that point, you will face charges not only for endangering security but also for obstructing a federal agent. The choice is yours." The officer's firmness made Ethan realize the situation was more serious than he thought. Cold sweat began to form on his brow, but he stubbornly recited a fake sequence of numbers. The technician entered the password and shook his head. "Incorrect." The officer's patience ran out. He gave a signal, and the technician connected another device directly to the power bank. This was where Leo's plan came into play. The USB I had used didn't just copy Data, it had also planted a digital backdoor. Leo had anticipated this scenario and given me a special master key to provide to the authorities if needed. And, through an anonymous tip sent earlier, I had done just that. A few minutes later, the large screen in the room suddenly lit up. The entire encryption layer had been shattered. But what appeared was not ordinary business. Secrets. It was a series of Excel files with cryptic names, complex diagrams of money flows, and detailed ledgers of wire transfers to offshore shell companies. There were real estate contracts with absurdly inflated values. Everything was there, clear and detailed down to the last dollar and date. It was a perfect blueprint of a massive money laundering operation. At that moment, all the color drained from Ethan's face. His arrogance evaporated like soap bubbles, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He stumbled backward, his legs weak, stammering incoherently. No, impossible. How? He stared at the screen, unable to believe what he was seeing. The empire he had worked so hard to build, the glorious future he and Isabella had envisioned it, was all laid bare, naked and ugly. The door burst open again. This time, it wasn't airport security. It was plainclothes federal agents, their faces grim, a warrant in hand. An agent stepped in front of Ethan, his voice echoing through the room. Ethan Hayes, we are with the FBI's Economic Crimes Division. You are under arrest for suspicion of money laundering and organized financial crimes. We need you to cooperate. The cold click of handcuffs snapped shut, binding the hands that had once held me, dragged me to the floor, and signed countless illicit deals. Ethan's American dream ended right there at the airport, in a small, suffocating room. Standing in a discreet corner of the departures hall, watching through a narrow gap in the doorway, I witnessed it all. A bitter, triumphant smile crossed my lips. I quietly turned and melted back into the crowd, leaving the collapse of an empire behind me. As Ethan was escorted out of the security room by 2 FBI agents, a small commotion erupted. A few onlookers recognized him as a well-known entrepreneur and quickly raised their phones to take pictures and videos. The murmurs and gossip grew louder. At the center of it all, Isabella stood frozen, her face ashen. She watched her lover being handcuffed, her eyes wide with panic and disbelief. I watched from a distance, waiting to see how she would react. Would she scream, rush forward to plead, or faint from shock? But Isabella did something I never expected, something that proved she was no ordinary mistress, who simply depended on a man. After a few seconds of shock, the panic in her eyes sharpened into a beauteous, calculated gleam. She quickly scanned her surroundings, assessing the situation. Then, just as Ethan was led past her, she suddenly let out a piercing cry. She clutched her stomach, and her body went limp as she collapsed to the floor. Ah! My stomach! Help! Help me! My baby! Her performance was flawless. The agonized scream, the terrified expression, and her very pregnant belly immediately captured everyone's attention. The focus of the chaos shifted. It was no longer about the white-collar criminal Ethan Hayes, but about a poor, pregnant woman at risk of a miscarriage. Airport paramedics rushed over with a wheelchair. People crowded around her, some asking questions, others trying to help. The attention of the security team was also diverted. It was in that moment of orchestrated chaos that I saw an incredibly quick, subtle move from Isabella. As a female staff member helped her into the wheelchair, her arm swung slightly backward, and a tiny, glittering object flew from her hand into a nearby potted plant. The action was so discreet that almost no one could have noticed it. Except for me, the one person who was focusing all my attention on her. My heart skipped a beat. It had to be a SIM card or a memory card, some crucial piece of evidence she needed to get rid of immediately. That collapse wasn't a crab's breakdown, it was a calculated performance to create an opportunity to destroy a scry evidence. It was then that I truly understood. Isabella was not a dependent. She was an accomplice, a fox just as cunning as Ethan, perhaps even smarter and more decisive in a crisis. She knew when to play the victim and when to sever all ties to protect herself. The satisfaction I felt at taking Ethan down suddenly cooled, replaced by a chilling unease. My enemy, it turned out, was not just one person. The wheelchair whisked Isabella away toward the medical station, leaving a stunned crowd behind. I knew I couldn't stay a second longer. My part was done. I pulled my baseball cap down low to hide my face and quietly blended into the Dacian stream of people moving in the opposite direction. I took out my phone, removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed the pieces into a distant trash can. Hailing a cab and leaving the airport, I watched the international terminal shrink in the distance. I had won a major battle, a battle that had toppled an entire empire. The taxi took me to an old apartment complex in a quiet alley far from the city center. This was the safe house Leo had prepared. It was small and simply furnished, but it was clean, and most importantly, no one knew it existed. The moment I stepped inside, I locked the door behind me, feeling an immense weight lift off my shoulders. I slumped onto the sofa, my body exhausted, but my mind strangely alert. The events at the airport replayed in my head like a slow-motion film. The first thing I did was open the new laptop Leo had left for me. I didn't check social media or my personal email. I went straight to the major news outlets. As I expected, a storm had already erupted. Headlines screamed from every site. Shocking, CEO of fintech giant Ethan Hayes arrested at JFK on suspicion of money laundering. Leaked photos show handcuffed tech mogul revealing illicit business empire. Transnational economic crime ring, possibly uncovered after random security check. Ethan's name was everywhere. The images of him being led away, his face dazed and panicked, were going viral. The business world he had been so proud to be a Dacian part of was now in turmoil. I read every article, every comment. People were analyzing the potential collapse of his company, the impact on the stock market. I had lit a single match, and now an entire forest was burning. But that wasn't all. The next morning, the second bomb dropped, and this time, it had my name on it. The video of Ethan assaulting me at the airport, posted by that unwilling witness, had become a viral earthquake on social media. If the tell is T5 Loven 24, business news only interested a certain demographic. The story of a wealthy CEO violently grabbing his wife in front of his mistress was a topic that enraged the entire public. The video was shared hundreds of thousands of times, accompanied by furious comments. I can't believe it. He looks so polished, drives a fancy car, lives in a nice house, but he's just an abuser. I feel so bad for his wife. Seeing him yank her down like that broke my heart. She sacrificed everything just to get thrown to the floor and handed divorce papers? The law needs to prosecute him for assault too. We can't let people like him walk free. Ethan was no longer just a white-collar criminal. He was now a symbol of toxic masculinity, a man condemned by all of society. Later that day, Leo came by. He brought food and a few changes of clothes for me. Seeing me, he sighed with relief. I'm just glad you're safe. You've really created a hurricane, Ellie. The business world is shaking, and every woman out there sees you as a symbol of resistance. I just gave a weak smile. I just did what had to be done. He got what he deserved. My voice was calm, but Leo noticed my hands were trembling slightly. He put the bag down, his tone becoming serious. Ellie, from now on, you have to be extremely careful. Cut off all your old contacts. Don't go out unless it's absolutely necessary. This storm will pass, but the people behind Ethan are not for liberates. So simple. They won't just sit back and do nothing. Your job now is to protect yourself. Let the law handle the rest. I nodded. I understood what Leo was saying. When I decided to start this war, I knew it wouldn't be easy. I looked out the window as the city lights began to twinkle. The world out there was in Talfake. An uproar over my story, but here I was, in a strange room, completely alone. The days in the safe house passed slowly and heavily. I barely left the apartment. I cooked for myself, read books, watched old movies, trying to keep my mind busy. But the silence of my surroundings only amplified my growing anxiety. Every strange noise in the hallway, every screech of tires on the tires street below, even a neighbor's phone ringing was enough to make me jump. I felt like I was constantly being watched by a pair of invisible eyes. I knew I was being paranoid, but my intuition was rarely wrong. And then, what I feared most happened, not with a threatening phone call or a scarred man at my door, but in a much more subtle and terrifying way. That Afternoon, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a pizza delivery guy. I hadn't ordered pizza. I opened the door a crack, keeping the security chain on, and called out, "Sorry, I think you have the wrong address. I didn't order anything." The young man looked at his delivery slip and then back at my apartment number, looking confused. He scratched his head. "Huh, that's weird. The address and apartment number are correct. The person who ordered even left a special note. It says to deliver it to Miss Eleanor, and that she likes thin crust with light cheese." My heart stopped. Eleanor. Thin crust, light cheese. They didn't just know my name and my secret address. They knew my eating habits. A preference only Ethan and my closest friends knew. The delivery guy saw my face turn pale and quickly waved his hands. "It must be a mistake. Sorry to bother you, ma'am." He turned and left, but his innocent words echoed in my ears. It wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. "We know where you are." I slammed the door shut and engaged all the locks, my body trembling. I immediately called Leo on the secure app he had installed. I told him what happened. On the other end, Leo was silent for a long moment, then I heard him curse under his breath. "Damn it. They're moving faster than I thought. They're sending you a message, Ellie. Do not open the door for any strangers." But the threats didn't stop there. The next morning, when I cautiously opened my 60s door to take out the trash, I found a small box placed neatly on my doormat. There was no sender or recipient name. My heart hammered against my ribs. I used a pair of tongs to carefully bring the box inside, as if it contained a bomb. I placed it in the kitchen sink and used a knife to open it from a distance. Inside, there was nothing dangerous, nothing scary, just a single red rose that was beginning to wilt. A wilted rose. My memory flashed back. In the past, on every anniversary, Ethan would give me a bouquet of vibrant red roses. This was clearly another message. A more personal and cruel one. "We don't just know where you are, we know your past. And we can turn your most beautiful memories into something withered and dead, just like this flower." Real fear began to take hold. I took a picture of the rose and sent it to Leo. This time, he couldn't maintain his composure. He called me immediately. "Ellie, this is serious. The evidence you gave the police might have taken down Ethan, but it might not be enough to topple the entire organization. They think you're still holding something back, and they're testing you." I sank to the floor, staring at the wilted rose. The satisfaction of revenge had completely vanished. Now, I only felt the weight of danger on my shoulders. This was no longer just about getting justice for myself. It had become a fight for survival. And my enemies were invisible, ruthless, and knew far too much about me. For days, I lived in a state of absolute terror. The wilted rose was like a faxalute curse, haunting my every dream. I didn't dare go out, didn't dare do anything that might attract attention. I realized that hiding in fear was exactly what they wanted. They wanted to turn me into a panicked prey, trapped in an invisible cage, too afraid to do anything. They wanted me to live the rest of my life in constant anxiety. But I couldn't let them win. After a sleepless night, watching the first rays of dawn stream through the Reyes window, a bold decision formed in my mind. I would not run anymore. The only way to escape fear is to confront it. The only way to make them stop seeing me as easy prey was to show them I was not weak. I had to stand up and rebuild my life from the very ashes Ethan had left behind. I contacted Leo. This time, I didn't talk about fear. I talked about my plan. "Leo, I can't live like this forever. I need to start over. I need a good lawyer. Someone who can help me with the legal battles ahead, not just the divorce, but the division of assets and protecting my legal rights." Leo seemed to have been waiting for me to say this. He responded immediately. "I know someone. Her name is Catherine. She's a lawyer who specializes in complex economic and civil cases. She's brilliant and she's tough. Let me set up a meeting." The meeting with Catherine took place in a small but professional law office. Catherine was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and an aura of confidence and determination. After listening to my entire story, she didn't offer pity, just a knowing nod. She spoke, her voice clear and authoritative. "Hello, Eleanor. I understand the situation. The first thing we need to do is officially file for divorce with the court. With the video evidence and proof of his infidelity and abuse, we have a strong case to have the divorce agreement you signed at the airport declared void due to coercion. Catherine continued to lay out the strategy. At the same time, we will petition at the court to freeze all joint assets held in both your names to prevent his family from trying to hide them. Ethan's criminal case will be a huge advantage for us in this civil suit. Don't worry. Justice may be slow, but it will come. Catherine's professionalism and strength gave me a huge boost of confidence. I knew I had found another solid ally. Leaving the law office, I felt a new surge of energy. The legal battle was being handled. Now it was time for me to rebuild my own life. I couldn't live off savings or a divorce settlement forever. I needed my own career. I thought about the architectural blueprints, the interior design ideas I had abandoned for the past 5 years. That passion was still burning inside me. I had Leo help me find a small office space in a building with good security. I started organizing my old portfolio, updating myself on new design trends. I reached out to a few old friends in the industry, telling them I was ready to come back. At first, it was just small projects consulting on a coffee shop design, renovating a condo. But to me, they were the first bricks in my new foundation. A week later, I stood in my new office. It was just a small, empty room, about 200 square feet, with only a desk and a chair. But standing there, breathing in the smell of new paint, I felt a strange sense of peace and freedom. The fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind, but it no longer controlled me. Because now I had a purpose, a path to follow. I was no longer a victim in hiding. I was a woman building her own future with her own hands. On Catherine's advice, I decided to visit Ethan at the Federal Detention Center. She said that seeing him once might help us understand more about his partners, and would also establish my position before we went to court. Let him see that you are not afraid. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't want to see his face again. But then I realized Catherine was right. This was a necessary step, not for emotional reasons, but for strategic ones. The visitation room at the detention center was suffocating and cold. Everything was painted a dreary gray, from the walls to the metal chairs. The smell of dampness and disinfectant created an atmosphere of confinement. I sat down, looking through the thick plexiglass that separated two worlds. I waited, my heart surprisingly calm. A few minutes later, Ethan was let out. The moment I saw him, I was truly shocked. The arrogant, impeccably dressed man I once knew was gone. In his place was a haggard figure with a scraggly beard, wearing a loose-fitting prison jumpsuit. He was much thinner, his eyes sunken and hollow, filled with a mixture of confusion and fear. He looked more pathetic than I could have imagined. Ethan sat down on the other side of the glass, his hand trembling as he picked up the phone receiver. I picked up mine. He looked at me, his expression a complex mix of hatred and desperation. He spoke first, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing here? Did you come to see how pathetic I am?" I answered calmly, my voice devoid of emotion. "I came to see what became of the man who was once my husband, the man who ruthlessly backed me into a corner." My words seemed to strike a nerve. The tough facade Ethan had tried to maintain crumbled. He leaned close to the glass, his voice frantic. "Eleanor, I'm begging you. Can you just tell the police you don't have any other evidence? Tell them you don't know anything. Please, save me." He started to cry, tears of fear and helplessness. They won't leave me alone. Even in here, they have ways of getting to me. And they won't leave you alone either." I listened in silence. His panic was the clearest confirmation of what Leo and I had suspected. My enemy was truly terrifying. I asked coldly, "Why should I save you, Ethan? When you drained our savings account to pay for your other child's medical care, did you think about saving me? When you violently yanked me to the floor at the airport in front of all those people, did you think about leaving me any way out?" My questions were like knives twisting in his cowardice. Ethan looked down, shaking his head frantically. "I was wrong, I know I was wrong. But you don't understand, Eleanor. They aren't normal businessmen. They're devils in suits. I was just a pawn. If you don't help me, neither of us will make it out of this alive. His desperation sparked a fleeting moment of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by contempt. He only ever thought of himself. Even now, I knew I had gotten the information I needed. I placed the receiver back on its cradle and stood up to leave. Seeing this, Ethan panicked. He slammed his hand against the plexiglass, shouting, "Eleanor, don't go. Listen to me, Eleanor." I didn't look back. I spoke my final words into the still dangling receiver. "You chose your path, Ethan. Now you have to walk it. Don't look for me again." I hung up, leaving him to his desperate cries behind the thick glass. Stepping out of the heavy iron gates of the detention center, I took a deep breath of free air. The meeting with Ethan left a heavy feeling in its wake. His absolute terror was a stark confirmation of the danger I faced. My enemy was not an individual, but an entire system, an invisible and ruthless organization. The fear was still there, but it had now transformed into a state of high alert. I continued my Trappatown's work at my small architecture firm, trying to rebuild my life while constantly on guard, like a tightrope walker. I changed all my old routines, taking different routes to work each day, never staying at the office too late, and always letting Leo know my schedule. He had installed a complex security camera system around my office and apartment. We were in a silent war, where every move had to be carefully calculated. And then, one gray afternoon as I was preparing to leave the office, something unexpected happened. As I opened the door, a small, folded piece of paper that had been slipped under the door fell at my feet. My heart skipped a beat. My apartment and office were two secret locations I believed no one knew about. I picked up the note, my hands trembling slightly. Inside, there were no threats, just a single line of neat handwriting. "I know you won't believe me, but we have a common enemy now. They don't just want Ethan silenced, they want everyone who knows anything to disappear. Meet me if you want to survive." Below, there was no signature, just a temporary email address written by hand. I recognized the handwriting. It was Isabella's. A chill ran down my spine. How did she know my office address? What was her goal? Was this a trap set by the UNAS organization, using her as bait to lure me out? A flood of questions and suspicions rushed through my mind. I immediately took a picture of the note and sent it to Leo and Catherine through our secure channel. Their reactions were the same as mine. Leo called back instantly, his voice filled with worry. "This is too risky, Ellie. You don't know what she's planning. It's most likely a trap. I don't think you should go." Catherine, after a moment of thought, offered a different perspective, the strategic view of a lawyer. If what she's saying is true, that she's also been backed into a corner, she could be an invaluable source of information. They might not be as guarded with her as they are with you. But if you meet, we have to set absolute safety conditions. I sat in silence, weighing the risks and opportunities. Running and hiding forever was not a solution. Ethan was down, but his organization was still active. If I didn't find a way to dismantle them completely, I would never have a day of peace. Isabella, as much as I hated her, was the only person besides Ethan who understood the structure of that organization. Perhaps she really was holding a trump card. After a long internal struggle, I made a reckless decision. I would meet Isabella. I would face the woman who, with my husband, had pushed me into the abyss. I opened my laptop, created a temporary email account, and sent a message to the address she had left. It was short. "The time and place are my decision. You come alone. Any sign of trouble, and the meeting is off." I chose an outdoor cafe in a large public square, a crowded place where an outdoor cafe assassination would be difficult to execute. I wanted to be in control of this meeting. After sending the email, I let out a long breath. I knew I was stepping into an even more dangerous game, but to achieve true freedom, sometimes you have to ally with your enemy. Let's see if the enemy of my enemy is truly my Taman friend, I thought. I arrived at the meeting spot, 15 minutes early. The outdoor cafe was in a section corner of the square, always bustling with people. I chose a table at the very edge, where I could see all the entrances and easily make an escape. Leo was also in place. He was sitting at another cafe across the square, pretending to be a student engrossed in his laptop. But I knew his eyes never left me. The tiny wireless earpiece in my ear crackled with his calm voice. Everything is under control. No sign of the subject yet. Right on time, Isabella appeared. She no longer had the glamorous, arrogant air she had at the airport. Instead, she wore a simple maternity dress, her face bare of makeup, revealing her exhaustion and the dark circles under her eyes. She looked wary, constantly glancing around like a hunted animal before approaching my table. Her growing belly made her walk with a heavy gait. This transformation surprised me. She pulled out a chair and sat down without a word of greeting. Neither did I. We looked at each other, two women who were once rivals, now sitting across from each other in the most ironic of circumstances. I finally broke the silence, my voice cold and emotionless. What do you want? I don't have much time. Isabella gave a bitter, humorless laugh. I want to live, Eleanor. And I think you do too. She looked me straight in the eye, the animosity temporarily gone, replaced by the seriousness of someone at their wits' end. You think Ethan was the big boss? He was just a high-level manager, a puppet put on display to fool everyone. The man behind it all, the one even Ethan was terrified of, we called him the principal. The name the principal caught my attention. Ethan had never mentioned him. Isabella continued, her voice trembling with anger. After Ethan was arrested, I thought I could just take the money and this baby and disappear. But I was wrong. They froze all my accounts, took back everything Ethan had ever given me. They sent someone to see me, told me if I didn't keep my mouth shut and disappear, my baby and I would have an accident. She placed a hand on her belly, fear flashing in her eyes. The SIM card I threw away at the airport. It had all the evidence of my direct dealings with the principal's people. It was my only insurance policy. But in my panic, I got rid of it. Now I have nothing. They could get rid of me at any time. To prove her words, she took a photo from her purse and pushed it toward me. It showed a middle-aged man, with a very distinguished, intellectual look, shaking hands with Ethan at an event. Is this the principal? I asked. Isabella shook her head. No. This is his most trusted right-hand man, the one who handles everything for him. No one knows his real name, but in the business, they call him Mr. Pierce. This information was new, valuable. It matched what Ethan had pleaded about in prison. I was starting to believe Isabella wasn't lying. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. The police will never believe someone like me. But they'll believe you. You're the victim in the public's eye, the hero who exposed the Tend case. I have the information, you have the credibility and the will. We work together to bring them down. After it's all over, you and I can go our separate ways, and never see each other again. It was an offer fraught with risk, but it was also the only chance. I looked at Isabella's tired face, at her growing belly. The hatred was still there, but my reason told me that in this war, I needed her. I replied, my voice decisive, a temporary alliance. But you give me everything you know, and don't you ever think about double-crossing me? Isabella nodded, a flicker of relief on her face. A reluctant alliance, a fragile pact between two rivals, had just been formed in the middle of a crowded square. The road ahead was now far more dangerous and unpredictable. Our strategy session took place late one evening at Catherine's law office. After hours, the place was quiet and perfectly secure. The long wooden lace conference table became the command center for a war without guns. The four of us sat around it, 4 people with different roles, connected by a single goal to take down a ruthless shadow organization. Me, Eleanor, the one who started the war. Isabella, the reluctant insider. Leo, the tech genius. And Catherine, the legal mastermind. The tension in the room was palpable, but so was the intense focus. The animosity between Isabella and me still hung in the matter air, but it was set aside in the face of a greater threat. Isabella began, laying out everything she knew. She described their operations, how they used legitimate-looking shell companies, like Ethan's, to launder enormous sums of dirty money. They never showed their faces. All orders came down through one man, Mr. Pierce. Isabella's voice still shook when she spoke of him. He has the appearance of an academic, always in a suit and glasses, speaks softly. But behind that facade is a true devil. He was the one who oversaw all the peeking of Ethan's activities, and the one who sent men to threaten my baby and me. She admitted she didn't know the principal's true identity. It was a fiercely guarded secret. But she knew Mr. Pierce's habits, his secret meeting spots, and his methods of encrypted communication. As Isabella spoke, Leo's fingers flew across his keyboard. He was cross-referencing her information with the data from Ethan's laptop. After a moment, he looked up, a soft aha escaping his lips. Here it is. The name Pierce doesn't appear directly, but there's an alias, the Pierce Gresta advisor, who constantly exchanged encrypted emails with Ethan. And almost all part of the suspicious money flows eventually end up in an offshore investment fund, managed by a company linked to him. Your information is a perfect match. Leo's confirmation gave Isabella's words weight. We now had a clearer picture of our enemy. Catherine, after listening to it all, began to synthesize and analyze it from a legal standpoint. She crossed her arms, her gaze thoughtful. The evidence we currently have, plus Miss Isabella's testimony, is enough to ensure Ethan has no way out. But to touch a seasoned fox like the principal and his right-hand man, Pierce, it's not enough. They're too sophisticated, all direct. Traces have been erased. Catherine continued, her voice strategic. We can't just hand this information to the police. They'll deny everything and probably find a way to silence the witnesses. To pull the weed out by its roots, we have to force the snake to come out of its hole. We need direct evidence, something irrefutable. We need to catch them in the act. An idea began to form in my mind, a risky idea, but the only one that might work. I looked at Isabella, then at Leo and Catherine. Then let's build a trap, I said, my voice firm. We'll make them believe there's another piece of evidence, something even more dangerous than what the police have. And that evidence is in our hands. All eyes turned to me. Our new chess game had officially begun. Our plan was meticulously detailed. The trap had to be sophisticated enough for a fox like Mr. Pierce to believe, and the bait had to be tempting enough for him to risk everything to get it. That bait was Isabella. She was the only one with the credibility and the motive to possess such damning evidence, and the most believable reason to betray the organization. Backed into a corner and desperate for money to run. The first step was to spread a rumor. Using an old contact in the criminal underworld whom she believed was one of Pierce's informants, Isabella started leaking information. She tearfully told a story of being used by Ethan and then cast aside by the organization, which had taken all her money. In her desperation, she hinted that before his arrest, Ethan had given her an insurance policy, an original, handwritten ledger detailing every black market transaction, with the principal's own signature and notes from the few times he had directly approved a deal. She let it be known that she was looking for a set, discreet buyer for this treasure, someone willing to pay a high price, so she and her child could flee the country, start a new life, and disappear forever. This lie was perfectly built on the truth of her situation, making it incredibly believable. A pregnant woman, cornered and desperate, willing to do anything for money, and for her child, it was a convincing narrative. While Isabella spread the stewed rumor, Leo and I prepared the stage. We chose an abandoned warehouse in an industrial park on the outskirts of the city, a place isolated enough for a shady deal, but complex enough to position support. With his skills, Leo turned the old warehouse into a technological fortress. Dozens of microcameras were hidden everywhere, from cracks in the walls to the insides of broken light bulbs. High-sensitivity microphones were installed to capture every word. Catherine, meanwhile, worked with a trusted contact within the police force. She fed them selected information, saying we were at risk of retaliation from a criminal group and needed protection from a distance. A SWAT team would be stationed about a mile away, ready to move on our signal. Safety was paramount, but so was secrecy, to avoid spooking the prey. The following days were a tense wait. The rumor was out, the trap was set. All we could do was wait for the fish to bite. I barely slept, every passing second feeling heavy. What if Pierce was too smart, too paranoid, and saw through the teens' act? What if he didn't take the bait, and we were left to live under this threat forever? The silence of an enemy is sometimes more terrifying than an attack. And then, after 3 days that felt like an eternity, we got a signal. Another Anonymous email arrived in Isabella's temporary account. There were no words, just an attached audio file. Leo scanned it carefully, and then played it. A man's voice, electronically distorted, echoed through the speakers. The thing you have, I want to see it. Friday night, 9 p.m., Warehouse X. Come alone. Bring the merchandise. If I see a single cop, you and the baby in your belly won't see the sunrise. My heart hammered. The fish had taken the bait. Mr. Pierce, or his people, had decided to act. Their recklessness stemmed from greed and paranoia. They couldn't allow such dangerous evidence to exist. But the joy of the catch was immediately replaced by a tangible fear. Friday night. It would be the night that decided everything. I looked at Leo, at Catherine, and then at Isabella. We all knew there was no turning back. The fish has taken the bait, I thought. The question is, are we about to land a shark, or will it drag us all to the bottom of the sea? Friday night, 9 p.m. The air in the abandoned warehouse was damp and thick with the smell of rust. I wasn't there, but through the monitors inside a carefully disguised van parked 200 yards away, I could feel everything. Leo, Catherine, and I sat inside, our eyes glued to a bank of small screens displaying feeds from the hidden cameras. In my earpiece, the sound of my own heartbeat was louder than the static from the microphones. The person facing the danger was Isabella. As planned, she was already inside the warehouse, holding a briefcase containing the fake ledger. She looked terrified, but I knew that beneath the fear was a determination as strong as my own. Her life, and her child's, depended on this performance. At exactly 9 p.m., a black sedan pulled up. 2 men in black suits got out first, scanning the area before opening the back door. Mr. Pierce. He emerged, his scholarly, elegant appearance in a dark suit a complete contradiction to the felon. Dilapidated surroundings. Pierce and his 2 men entered the warehouse. He looked Isabella up and down, his gaze cold and emotionless. Where is it? He asked, his voice soft but commanding. Isabella, following the script, acted nervous. Where's the money? I need to see the money first. I have to leave tonight. Mr. Pierce smirked and signaled to one of his men, who opened a briefcase filled with stacks of large bills. $2 million. Enough for you and the child to start a new life, somewhere far away. Now give it to me. Isabella clutched her briefcase, shaking her head. I have to check if the money is real. The psychological battle began, both sides trying to probe the other. My chest tightened. One small mistake, and Isabella would be in danger. I signaled to Leo to be ready to alert the SWAT team. But just then, something completely unexpected happened. From outside, another 7 Tau luxury car pulled up silently, its headlights beaming directly into the 7 warehouse entrance. The door opened, and a man stepped out. The moment I saw him on the screen, Catherine and I froze. Leo let out a soft gasp. No way. The man was the chairman of a major charitable foundation, a respected businessman who frequently appeared on television as a model philanthropist. He was the principal. His appearance threw our entire plan off course. Why would a man as cautious as him show up in person? Greed and paranoia had won. He couldn't trust anyone else to verify and destroy such a critical piece of evidence. He had to see it for himself. The principal walked into the warehouse, his aura calm and powerful. He glanced at Pierce, then at Isabella, and gave a slight nod. Good work, Pierce. And, hello, Miss Isabella. I believe we should conclude this business quickly. His presence made the air 10 times heavier. He gestured, and Pierce moved to snatch the briefcase from Isabella, but the principal suddenly raised a hand to stop him. He didn't look at Isabella. Instead, he turned his head, his gaze as sharp as a razor, and stared directly at a camera hidden in the rafters, the one Itikster knew had the clearest view. He smiled, a smile that would make your blood run cold. And then he spoke, his voice calm but striking my earpiece like a dash thunderclap. Miss Eleanor, I know you're out there. A fine performance, I must admit. You concocted a story, lured us into a trap. You are very clever women. My heart stopped. We were exposed. He knew everything. And he still came, which meant his preparations were even more thorough than ours. He continued, his smile turning cruel. But I believe it's time to drop the curtain. Immediately. After he said that, all the monitors in front of me went black. My earpiece filled with a loud, hissing static. Leo panicked. Signal's gone. They're using a professional-grade jammer. We're completely blind. A cold dread washed over me. Isabella was in there alone with true monsters. Signal's gone. Leo's shout was like a hammer blow to the dead silence inside the van. The three of us stared at the blank screens, raw panic setting in. Isabella was in there, and we had no idea what was happening. The enemy knew exactly where we were and had cut us off. That meant they were about to act, and it would be ruthless. Catherine grabbed her phone, her voice urgent but steady. I'm calling in the Batacas SWAT team. Now. But I knew a mile was still too far. From the moment they moved to when they reached the warehouse would take several minutes at best. In those minutes, anything could happen to Isabella. I couldn't let her die. Despite my hatred for her, in this fight, she was my ally, and I was responsible for her safety. In that chaotic moment, a cold decisiveness took hold of me. I turned to Leo, grabbing his shoulder. Leo, try to get the audio back. Anything. I just need to hear what's happening inside. Leo nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard. At a frantic pace, trying to find a clear frequency. Outside, I could hear the faint sound of sirens, growing closer. The team was on its way. Catherine ended her call and looked at me, her eyes filled with anxiety. They're coming. But Eleanor, there's nothing more we can do. It's up to them now. I bit my lip, feeling a wave of helplessness. Suddenly, a crackle came through my earpiece, followed by a few broken sounds. Leo had done it. We had no video, but we had audio. I heard Mr. Pierce's voice roaring. Deal with her, now. The cops are almost here. Then came Isabella's terrified scream, followed by the cold, steady voice of the principal. She doesn't leave this warehouse alive. My heart felt like it was going to burst. They were going to kill her. Just then, a cacophony of other sounds erupted. The sound of the warehouse's metal door being smashed open, the powerful shouts of police officers. Police! Everybody freeze! Drop your weapons! Then came the sharp, concussive pops of two Fremekins. Firearms, not regular gunshots, but the sound of flashbangs or tear gas launchers. Shouts, crashing objects, curses, it all merged into a symphony of team violent chaos. We sat in the van, holding our breath, listening. Every sound made our hearts leap. The firefight and struggle seemed to last only a few minutes, but to us, it felt like an eternity. Then, gradually, everything fell silent, replaced by the shouted commands of the police and the sound of heavy boots. A long moment later, when the area outside was fully secured and bathed in the flashing red and blue lights of police cars, a uniformed officer approached our van. Just as Catherine had arranged. She rolled down the window. The officer gave a brief report. We have all subjects in custody, including the ringleader. Thank you for your cooperation. I let out a sigh of relief but immediately asked, what about the woman inside? Is she safe? The officer nodded. She's safe, just shaken up. I have to say, she's very brave. During the chaos, she used her briefcase to strike the man holding her, creating the opening we needed to move in and neutralize the subject. She's being taken to the hospital for observation. Hearing this, a complex emotion washed over me. In her moment of truth, Isabella had fought, not just for herself, but for our entire plan. The war seemed to be over. The masterminds were caught. Leo, Catherine, and I stepped out of the van, looking toward the brightly lit warehouse. A cold night wind blew past, but I no longer felt afraid. Instead, I felt an exhaustion that was bone deep, both physical and mental. I looked at my own trembling hands. We had won. But the price of this victory had been immense. On the day of the preliminary hearing for Ethan and his co-conspirators, the Talon city was in a frenzy. From early morning, hundreds of reporters and curious citizens crowded the courthouse entrance. I wasn't required to be there. For the Dager criminal trial, the evidence from the warehouse raid was more than enough. But I decided to go anyway. I chose a simple black dress, sunglasses, and a face mask, and quietly blended into the crowd, finding a seat in the back row of the Courtroom. I didn't want to be recognized or become the center of attention. I just wanted to be an ordinary spectator, watching justice be served. The courtroom was solemn and suffocating. On the bench, the judges sat with impassive faces. Below, Ethan's family, his mother, Helen, and his sister, Vanessa, sat in the front row, their eyes red and their faces devastated. When Ethan and the other defendants were led in, a murmur went through the room. He didn't look as haggard as he had in the detention center. His lawyers had clearly prepared him to look more presentable, back in a neat suit, but it couldn't hide his thinned frame and hollow expression. He walked like a robot, his eyes staring blankly ahead. He didn't see me. The trial proceeded as Catherine had predicted. The prosecution presented one irrefutable piece of evidence after another. The data from the power bank, the ledger recovered from the warehouse, testimony from others in the ring, and even testimony from Isabella, who was treated as both a co-conspirator and a confess, cooperating witness. With each piece of evidence, Ethan's face grew paler. He barely fought back, just sitting there and accepting his fate. His lawyer tried to argue that he had been used and coerced, but against the clear proof of his direct involvement and profit, all defenses were feeble. The entire trial was like a play with a foregone conclusion, just waiting for the final curtain. And then, that moment came. After deliberation, the presiding judge read the verdict, his voice strong and clear, convicting Ethan on a long list of charges: money laundering, fraud, embezzlement, illegal business practices. The cumulative sentence was long enough for him to pay for his crimes behind iron bars. 20 years. As the number was announced, Helen let out a shriek and fainted. Vanessa burst into hysterical sobs, calling for her mother. The courtroom erupted in chaos, amidst the nonstop flashing of cameras. In that chaos, as Ethan was being led away by the bailiffs, his eyes suddenly scanned the room, as if searching for something. And then, his gaze stopped, locking onto me in the back row. Across the distance, through the sea of people and the noise, I saw a complex emotion in his eyes. It was no longer hatred or pleading. It was exhaustion, a belated remorse, and even something like relief. He looked at me, his mouth moving slightly. I couldn't hear him, but I could read his lips. 2 words, thank you. And then, I'm sorry. A thank you for not letting him escape to live a life of fear. An apology for all the pain he had caused. I just gave a single, silent nod. An acceptance. An ending. That was the last time I ever saw him. I turned and walked out of the daytime courthouse, leaving all the chaos behind me. Stepping outside, the bright sunlight made me squint. I took a deep breath, and my chest suddenly felt incredibly light, but there was no sense of a victor's triumph. A few days after the trial, as I was focusing on a new design project in my office, an unexpected visitor appeared. It was Arthur, my father-in-law. It had been a long time since I'd seen him. He looked much older, his hair completely white, his back stooped, and his once kind eyes were now heavy with sorrow. He stood hesitantly at my office door, looking deeply uncomfortable. I was surprised, but invited him in. I made a pot of tea and set it before him. The atmosphere was awkward. Finally, Arthur spoke first, his voice hoarse and weary. "Eleanor, I came here to apologize to you." I looked at him, waiting. He stared at his teacup, his hands clasped and trembling. I knew about Ethan's business for a long time. I knew it wasn't honest, and I knew he was seeing another woman. I tried to talk to him a few times, but he wouldn't listen. He was blinded by money and ambition. He let out a long sigh, as if releasing a burden he'd carried for years. I should have been stronger. I should have told you. But I was afraid. Afraid of the family falling apart, afraid of Helen's reaction, afraid of losing this fake facade of a happy home. My silence, my weakness, was also a crime. It contributed to all of this. I am truly sorry, Eleanor. He looked up at me, his old eyes welling with tears. Hearing his confession, I felt a mix of emotions. I was no longer angry, just sad. Arthur was just a weak man, a father helpless to stop his son's wrongdoing. He was a victim in his own family's tragedy. To atone, Arthur took a small, worn, leather-bound notebook from his bag and placed it on the table. This was Ethan's old journal. From the early days when he first started working with them. He was naive then, and wrote down some important things that he later tried to erase. I've kept it all this time. I know it might not have much legal value now, but maybe it will help you find complete closure. I took the journal, feeling the weight of the past in my hands. This was perhaps the final piece of the puzzle. I looked at Arthur and said gently, "What's past is past, Arthur. We all have to face the lives we have now. I don't blame you. Please, take care of yourself." Arthur nodded and stood up, his back even more stooped. He left quietly, a lonely and regretful figure. I sat alone, holding stooped the old journal. I didn't open it right away. The confession hadn't changed the shallow past, but it had helped me untie the final knot in my heart. With the entire criminal organization dismantled and Ethan's case concluded, the final loose ends of my old life began to be tied up. As for Isabella, due to her extensive cooperation with the investigation, she received significant leniency. Catherine informed me that she was given a suspended sentence on the condition that she leave the country and not return for a long period. It was a price to pay, but it was also a chance at a new life for her and her child. Before she left, Isabella sent me a surprising message from an unknown number, asking to see me one last time. She said it wasn't to beg for anything, but simply to say goodbye. I hesitated for a long time. The conflict felt over. But a sense of curiosity, and maybe a twisted form of empathy, prompted me to agree. I wanted to see what kind of person she had become after walking through the Prossen's fire. We met at a small tea house by a lake. Isabella was there first, at a table in the garden. When I arrived, she stood up, a small gesture of courtesy I'd never seen from her before. She was thinner, and her face had lost its sharp, calculating edge, replaced by the calm resignation of someone who has accepted their fate. She finally spoke, her voice devoid of its former taunts, only deep fatigue. "Thank you for coming. I know this is a lot to ask." She looked out at the distant water, her hand unconsciously stroking her belly. "I know an apology is worthless. Now. I was wrong to come into your family. I was blinded by ambition and by Ethan's promises. I thought if I had him and his money, I would have everything." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "But it turns out, when I got those things, I lost something more important. Peace, and freedom." She turned back to me, her eyes, for the first time, holding no hostility. "I'm leaving the country soon, alone. The money I have left is just enough to cover Prosperfalv, the baby surgery and our living expenses for a short while. After that, I don't know. I'll have to start over." Hearing her speak of her uncertain future, I felt no joy. The woman before me was no longer a hated rival, but simply a mother trying to do everything for her child. I put down my teacup. The past is over. You, me, Ethan, we've all paid the price for our choices. I don't hate you anymore. I hope your child will have a healthy and peaceful life. My words seemed to stun her. She looked at me, her eyes turning red. She whispered, "Thank you." We said nothing more. When Isabella stood to leave, her figure looked frail and lonely as she disappeared into the crowd. I didn't forgive her, but I chose to let go. Letting go of hatred was its own form of liberation. After the storms passed, my life slowly returned to a peaceful rhythm. The divorce and asset division hearing was quick and smooth. With irrefutable evidence of Ethan's infidelity, abuse, and coercion, Catherine dominated the Portis proceedings. The court declared the airport divorce agreement void. Our legal joint assets, after the illicit funds were seized by the government, were divided fairly. I received a share that justly reflected my contributions and sacrifices over 5 years. Holding the final court order, I felt not joy for the money, but an immense sense of relief. It was recognition. It was financial freedom. My small architecture firm began to flourish. Word of mouth spread, and I started getting larger contracts. Clients came to me not just for my skills, but because they admired my story and my strength. My creativity seemed to blossom after the turmoil. I found joy in every blueprint, in turning empty spaces into true homes for people. With my settlement, I bought a new condominium. Not a vast, cold mansion, but a settlement. Cozy top-floor apartment with a sun-drenched balcony. I designed every detail myself, choosing warm cream tones, rustic wooden furniture, and abstract Paintings I had done myself. Every corner of my home was a reflection of my lad soul, one that loved freedom, beauty, and peace. One weekend evening, I sat on my soft sofa, a cup of warm chamomile tea in hand, quietly watching the city lights sparkle. There was no more fear, no more scheming, just a pleasant silence. My phone rang. It was Leo, calling to congratulate me on landing a design contract for a small resort, a project I was passionate about. We talked and joked like the best of friends. So, is my star architect ready to conquer the world? Leo laughed. I laughed too, a genuinely happy sound. The world is too big. I'm happy just conquering my own life. It was a simple conversation, but it filled me with warmth. After hanging up, I stepped onto the balcony. The gentle breeze played with my hair. I looked up at the starry sky, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt happy. My life continued on its quiet, peaceful course. I found joy in simple things. Waking up in my own home, brewing tea, watching the plants on my balcony grow. I thought my life would just be a series of these calm days. But life always has surprises. One afternoon, I returned from a client meeting to find an international package waiting for me. A vague sense of unease flickered, a conditioned response. The package was from Switzerland, with no return address. Back in my apartment, I carefully opened the box. Inside were 2 items. The first was a photo of a chubby, adorable newborn boy sleeping peacefully in a white bassinet. He looked perfectly healthy, an angel. The second was a cashier's check and a handwritten letter. When I saw the amount on the check, I froze. $250,000. The exact amount from the savings account Ethan had stolen. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. The familiar handwriting was Isabella's. The letter was short. Eleanor. By the time you read this, my son and I will have started a new life. Far away. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know the pain I caused you can never be repaired. I just wanted you to know something. My son's surgery was a miracle. He is completely healthy. But the miracle wasn't the surgery. It was how we paid for it. After all of Ethan's and the organization's assets were seized, a portion was directed into a state social welfare fund. Through an unbelievable turn of events, a children's charity received a grant from that exact fund. They paid for my son's entire surgery. Your act of revenge, in a way no one could have predicted, saved my son's life. I don't know if this is karma or some cruel irony. Either way, I owe you a life. I owe you my son's future. This $250,000 is the second last of my own assets, from before I met Ethan. I am returning it to you, not as compensation, but to give back what was always yours. Please consider it a long overdue apology. Goodbye. I folded the letter. I looked at the baby's photo, then at the check. The truth was too complex, too ironic. My actions, born of pain and hatred, had inadvertently saved an innocent life. Good and evil, revenge and mercy, had blended into a strange, cyclical pattern I couldn't define. The check in front of me felt incredibly heavy. It was no longer a symbol of loss or victory, but a symbol of life's complexity. I thought I had turned a new page, but there was one final sentence from the old chapter that I had to write myself. The next morning, I took the check and the photo to Catherine and Leo. I couldn't keep this money for myself. It carried too heavy a story. I told them my decision. I don't want this money. I want to turn it into something meaningful. I want to start a small charitable foundation. They both looked at me with support and admiration. Catherine said it was a wonderful idea and offered to handle the legal work. Leo just smiled. You always manage to surprise people, Ellie. Do what you feel is right. I'll always be here for you. And so, the Eleanor Foundation for Children's Futures was born. A small charity, with the initial goal of funding heart surgeries for children from low-income families. I wanted to use this karmic money to continue planting seeds of life, to ensure that the circle of cause and effect would henceforth only yield good things. A few months later, I went to visit my mother. She no longer asked about the softer past. She just held my hand and said, "My daughter looks so different now. There's a clarity and peace in your eyes." I smiled and hugged her. Yes, I was different. I was no longer a submissive wife, nor a woman consumed by revenge. I was myself, Eleanor, free and at peace. Life flowed on gently. The firm grew. I found joy in my work and in mentoring young architects. Leo was still my rock, his friendship a priceless gift. This afternoon is a beautiful weekend afternoon. I sit on my balcony, finishing a good book. The breeze carries the faint scent of jasmine from my garden. I close the book and close my eyes, listening to the symphony of life around me. Children playing in the park below, birds singing, the wind rustling through the towering and dead leaves. I realize that happiness is not a destination, but a journey. It is the journey through the storm that teaches you to appreciate the sunny days. It is the journey of facing pain to find your inner strength. It is the journey of letting go of hatred to find true peace. The greatest revenge is not destroying the one who hurt you, but building a brilliant and beautiful new life for yourself. The door to the past is closed. A new one is open before me, full of light and endless possibilities. I don't know what challenges lie ahead, but I am no longer afraid. Because I know that with faith in myself and an open heart, I can face anything. I smile to myself. A smile of freedom and gratitude. My life is just beginning.